150,000 Kenya shillings for the cost of production, and then you also have the extra 200,000 Kenya shillings that you've made. So that's your profit, that's your take home. Uko na connection? When you can tell. When it comes to money. My name is Derek Mboya. It's in a greenhouse. Ai, na vile naona yellow mingi huko nyuma. On social media, I'm known as Farmer Mboya. We've been here since 2020 July. That's when the first greenhouse started production. I'm a full-time farmer. I do different varieties of crops. I do tomatoes, I do cucumbers. I've done different varieties of crops. I've also done conventional farming, and I'm right now doing hydroponics type of farming. I also do kale. Under convention, I did onions, I did potatoes, I did maize, beans, the basic ones that we do on the open field. We have to disinfect our shoe. That's basically a brief intro of whom I am and what I do on a daily basis. So this is my life. Okay. This is what I love doing, and this is what I'm passionate about. Okay, good morning. So welcome to Green Talos Enterprise, which is under Young African Works. So let me just get my overall. We'll be off to the farm immediately. Okay, follow me. This is hydroponics that I'm going to take you through today, how it works, what happens in terms of preparation, up to the point whereby we do sell our produce to the market. Basically, we are going to see every aspect of hydroponics from preparation to the end, where we get the produce. This farm is located in Ngong area, Kajiado County, and to be specific, this place is known as Kibiko. Location of Young African Works project is Green Talos is adopted under the Young African Works program. We basically do hydroponics and nothing else.
Kwa majina naitwa Brian Nyamweya. Hii ni pumice. Naiosha kuremove hizo viruses zilikuwa ndani. So tunaosha like this.
Purely hydroponics, we don't do soil. If you find a soil greenhouse over here, what we do is just testing and getting to know the difference between hydroponics and the soil, and see if there is difference in production.
This is a capsicum seedling. Here we go. This is the kind of a seedling that we've planted today. So we have a spacing in between, and they go hand in hand, alternating with the other side. So on this other side we have tomatoes seedling. Here we go. This is the tomato seedling. So we've planted here to see if they have the quality, and also we have the projected outcome for produce, so that we can compare with hydroponic system.
We also have vertical gardening, whereby we farm moving upwards instead of the normal way that we do farming on the field, the conventional way. The plants are fed through irrigation system. The film technique nutrient film technique, NFT. It involves feeding the nutrients throughout the entire system. I'll show you that in a little while. How I got into farming is quite a story. Back in 2015 when I joined campus, I immediately joined the basketball team. The only problem was that we only get paid when we go and play tournaments. There isn't any amount that you get paid while training and doing such. In 2016, with friends of mine, I began with the capsicum, the pilipili hoho, the one for the green, the one that is green in color, and I mixed it with coriander. We were in Bondo. Bondo is quite it's a hardship area. We saw that these particular crops will fetch high prices in the market, but then what we never did is market research. So we just came and involved ourselves in this particular venture. And another big mistake we did while starting was that we went on to do farming without prior knowledge or any simple research in regards to what is needed. When we did that particular venture, it never went well. We had so many losses in terms of production cost versus what we got out of it. In fact, when we went to do the harvesting, we only picked a few crops and then we were done in a field of 1 acre. Currently, Young African Works project is the largest hydroponics farm that is well known in Africa currently, because it holds around 100 greenhouses, 103 to be particular. So 103 greenhouses, there was an additional 3. We've done the experimentation for years and we've been here since 2020 July. That's when the first greenhouse started production. It has been an experience. We've been learning. Fairly, it's a new system that has been around in other countries, but now new in Kenya. So we had to tailor-make it to fit the Kenyan climates and all the dynamics that comes with doing it in Kenya. It has been introduced in a massive way with this particular project. Come in. We are still doing preparations. That's why you can see everything has not settled yet in this particular greenhouse. So for safety, I'll just put on my overall, because when you're inside the greenhouse, you should have your overall on your body. Here we do hydroponic system, and this is a typical greenhouse. It's known as the trough system. So hydroponics has a lot of systems, but then this one in particular is known as the trough system. Used to plant those crops that need a lot of space to grow and at the same time are very heavy, so they cannot be carried under the nutrient film technique. What we do basically, we plant crops under the trough system of hydroponics. As I had mentioned before, hydroponics has different systems, and this one is known as the trough system. In this greenhouse, we've planted tomatoes, planted capsicum, and we've also planted cucumber, and kales as well. So from time to time, because we usually have a gap between one crop cycle and to the next crop cycle of about 3 months. So within those 3 months, from time to time, we've planted kales inside here. That's Swiss chard, true kale. In Kenya, we call them spinach, sukuma wiki. So those are the things that we've planted in this particular greenhouse, and they've done really well. So right now, the greenhouse is empty because we are transitioning from one crop cycle. We are just cleaning and preparing so that we can transition to the next crop cycle. This hydroponic system, as you can see, what we do, we feed the plants using the drip system. Drip system is economical. These are the pipes that bring in water and nutrients at the same time. Another unique thing about hydroponics, we don't use soil. Being that we don't use soil, I know the big question is, what do we use? Currently, what we use is, if you can look at this, we have pumice. Pumice in Swahili, I'm not sure about the name in Swahili, but then it's the stone that you use to scrub your feet. This one has been broken down into small chunks, which are helping us as the plant base. And then we also have cocoa peat. Cocoa peat is got from the coastal region, from the coconut husk, the covering of the coconut. So when you put coconut on the table, you always notice that there will be droppings like that like droppings from the coconut. So we mix the two, And the reason as to why we mix the two is because coco peat has high water retention, and it will help us in holding the water for a good duration of time so that the plants are able to absorb the nutrients. And then when it comes to pumice, pumice has what we call, it's inert, so it doesn't take up, it doesn't cause chemical reaction when it interacts with any kind of nutrients. When you put NPK, when you put DAP, it doesn't interact with it in a way to cause chemical reactions. It doesn't take up any other form apart from it being inert. Those two combinations help us in growing our crops instead of using soil. So we transitioned from conventional farming, which is using open field and soil, to this particular system, most particularly because this system, you've already cut down pathogens. So we are not obliged to use a lot of fungicides. We are not obliged to use things like a lot of pesticide, because it's a controlled environment, it's a greenhouse. So this system helps us to cut down on the cost of production, since when you don't use a lot of fungicides, which are very expensive, don't use a lot of fungicides, then you've cut down the cost also. And at the same time, if it's a controlled environment and pests are limited to coming inside, then you've already cut down the cost of pesticides as well. So fungicides and pesticides are out for a bit, and you've already cut them about half. So when you are to use, let's say, 1 liter on the open field, you'll use half a liter in the hydroponic system and in a greenhouse. So it's a combination of two things, the greenhouse and the hydroponic system. That's basically how we try to cut down cost, because this is farming for the future. Same year, I took a little break for 2 months and then went back into farming again, into a place next to the lake. So this time I never went with so much ambition, but I just went to try and see if farming can take place and can it work. So what I did is I did onions, but then not in a big acreage. I just did in a quarter an acre. I did fully onions. So when I did fully onions, another mistake that I did, I never went to the market again to inquire. But then it was by good luck that this particular period where I did this particular crop of onions, the market was not flooded. So I had a chance to make money out of it. I went to Bondo market, found the mama mbogas, had a conversation with them and told them that I do onions if they're interested. Luckily, I got someone who was willing to go dig the ground, take the onions, clean them, and package them and take them to the market. By that duration, onions were 55 shillings per kg. So I sold the entire quarter acre and I got decent money out of it. It was 48,000 Kenya shillings for that particular space, given the amount that I had spent on preparing and doing everything. That was 2016, and then I transitioned a bit to 2017. I took a break because that's the year that I had my attachment. On coming back, I was so much involved into activities, environmental activities that involved farming. Things like to do with the environment, how to mitigate environmental factors, such as people using firewood instead of other sources of fuel. I did that for 2018 and I was quite busy, so I chose crops that do not need so much attention. I went for beans and maize, the basic ones, the ones that only need you maybe, let's say, 4 times the entire season. When I went for maize and beans, it was basically informed by the aspect that I was doing these climate projects and working with community. I did my farming, first of all, in a way that promotes people in the society. I went into moringa farming. I also went to bamboo farming because the aim was to increase the forest cover in Siaya County. So when I did that, I did it to a level. We wrote a project that involved taking water hyacinth and transforming it into fuel briquettes and then selling it to the locals and making business out of it. As you know, Lake Victoria, the water hyacinth is a menace, and it hinders so many people from reaching their economic potential. I did that, did the project in Nairobi, and then transitioned and went to represent my country in USA, California. On coming back, I took up farming again from where I had paused. So 2019, after graduation, I transitioned into full-scale maize farming, and that I did up to 11 acres of maize. Then the next season, beans. And at this particular period, at the same time, I was doing what we call hydroponics way of farming. I enrolled into a school known as Miramar International College, did hydroponics farming and general agribusiness management. On doing that, I took a loan from KCB, constructed the greenhouse. The amount was enough to sustain me for the first season. I transitioned from conventional way of farming, which I used to do in the Nyanza region, and the maize now in full scale, I did it in large scale, I did it in Kilgoris. It was quite a distance from Nairobi to that place. So as you can see, this is the main pipe that feeds the entire drip system in this particular greenhouse. So this pipe runs from end to end, covering all the 8 troughs. And what it does is that it brings water in plenty, and the receiving point is in at the middle, so that the water is evenly distributed to both ends, and it's able to trickle down to the entire greenhouse. So as I told you before, that this particular pipe is fed by the overhead tank, so that we are trying to cut cost of power, the power cost, to pump the water. So it comes using gravity after it has been pumped once at the overhead tank. Well, the farthest end is where the water is received. The gradient of this particular greenhouse is put in a way that it slants coming towards this particular end. So water flows from that particular end, the excess water flows from that particular end, and this end of the trough has a drainage. So a drainage is just below this particular trough and the heap of pumice and cocoa peat. What it does is that it takes us straight to the bleeding tank. So the system is used to conserve water in a massive way, in such a way that the water can be reused to feed once again. So let me show you the bleeding tank and how it works. Okay, so let me show you the bleeding tank. Actually, when you're building the bleeding tank, it has to be lower because you want the water. You see, we don't want to use power in every aspect of this particular system. The idea is to conserve as much as we can. So this in particular is the bleeding tank. What happens is that the mixing starts from here. So the fertilizers that we use the normal fertilizers that are used in the open field, but then the only difference is that our fertilizers are soluble. They can dissolve in water, and then it now becomes easier to feed the plants in this particular system. So once we bring those particular nutrients, what we do, we mix them inside this particular tank. For that particular time, we don't use it as a bleeding tank. We use it as a place to mix. Then after mixing the nutrients inside this particular tank, we pump it to the overhead tank. I'm just going to show you the overhead tank in a short while. So mixing is done here, then it's pumped in the overhead tank. It flows inside the greenhouse using gravity, and then after flowing inside the greenhouse, the excess comes back to this particular greenhouse. Like today, the weather is quite chilly, so ideally you'll use very little water, so a lot of water will come back to this bleeding tank. So it's connected in a way that water flows back to this particular bleeding tank, and then when it has already flowed to this particular bleeding tank, we can reuse the water and pump it again to the overhead tank. So it's a cycle that is continuous on a daily basis. It ensures that we use so little water. So in a week, we can use up to 3,000 liters in 1 week. We can use up to 3,000 liters. So enough of the bleeding tank. Let me just show you quickly the overhead tank. So the overhead tank is right behind there. You can see a tank that is right behind there. So what the overhead tank does, as I've mentioned before as well, is it feeds the pipes and the drip system using gravity. So Once the water is pumped from the bleeding tank to the overhead tank, it flows down to the drip system, and then the cycle continues up and down until the water has depleted and you have to refill again. When the water is from the bleeding tank, it's pumped directly to the overhead tank, and the overhead tank the water now will be open, and it will be taken through the drip system inside the greenhouse through gravity. So that ensures that we have a constant pressure. That's why it's raised up, so that we can take advantage of the gravity. Okay, so that was a hydroponic system that never had plants. So I'm taking you to one that has plants right now, and it's under production. It was just planted recently. So just to get the picture of what happens in a greenhouse. Ai, na vile naona yellow mingi huko nyuma. Uto tu vitu twa kufunga. Sasa si wewe ndio umehaki system. Unatoa weeds. So welcome, let me show you a greenhouse with the actual crops. The system that I had explained to you with crops. So for this one, we have to take precautions. We have to disinfect our shoe because we carry pathogens, and these are clean environment that we don't want to contaminate. So come in. This is a system that is under production, and as you can see, dynamics have changed from what I was explaining to you, the actual technical bit about hydroponics. So for this particular system, it's still the trough system, but then the only difference is that it has crops and it's under production. These are fairly young crops. As you can recall, we had these wires that are used to support the crops. So right now you can see it in action. So we have the rope, the string, and then the plants now. And now you can see actually how this particular line helps. So you can see that these crops have been supported using the string, and then the string has been drawn up to this particular end on top of this particular line. The other bit that has changed, you can see we have these particular sticky traps. We call them sticky traps. And what the sticky traps does is that it helps in showing us exactly what kind of pest we are dealing with inside the greenhouse. So we have the yellow one, and we also have the blue one over there. So different insects are attracted to different colors, and that's the explanation behind the different colors. So if we have blue, it attracts different pests. If we have the yellow one, it also attracts different pests. And what happens, we don't use the sticky traps to trap these particular insects. It's just a tool that we use to investigate and see what we are dealing with inside the greenhouse. So besides the long one, we also have the small ones that are quite close to the crop, because the pest will go directly to the crops and instead feed on the crops. Hydroponics doesn't consume large parcel of land, so that's why I transitioned to this one, because it's conducive, or you can do it in an urban setup. Like this is semi-urban setup. Ngong is barely, people stay around us, and we also do farming in their midst. That's the reason why I transitioned to hydroponics farming. But after I had gained access to knowledge, I knew exactly what to do when starting. It has been a journey from 2019 attending classes, then 2020 July transitioning now to hydroponic farming, doing it actively now. What I had done in class, I gave it life now. It has been a journey. Hydroponics is fairly new in Kenya. We transitioned because you get the knowledge from outside, but then you tailor make it, or you customize it to fit the environment that you are in. We've done that perfectly, and right now we can confidently say that we've reached a level whereby we can do consultancy, we can do a crop cycle full of profits and minimizing the cost. So we've done all those dynamics, and now we are very confident about hydroponics farming. This is cucumber. The crop is cucumber, and it's known as Bologna variety. It was planted 2 weeks ago, but then there is this aspect of how long it takes during propagation. So during propagation, while it's on the trays as a seedling, when you want to develop it to a seedling level, it takes approximately 21 days. So 21 days plus 2 weeks now, that should give you averagely the amount of time these crops have taken to reach this particular point. In particular, this particular cucumber, it needs support. You can see that the crop has to be supported or else it will fall down, and if it falls down, then it attracts a lot of fungal infections and every other thing, and even injury, because when it has fallen down, it's prone to being stepped on while passing and doing your farm management activities. So it's wise to support it using this particular peg and string. This crop should be ready, and let's say it will take around a month and 2 weeks to be ready for harvesting. Right now we are still in the process of preparing it, and we also have to do the cultural activities from time to time so that we manage the crops. So the crop is basically something that needs attention like a child. On a daily basis, you have to be here and look after it and see to it that the growth is not disturbed, because crops also develop stress like human beings. So when you're touching it too much from every now and again, then you're causing stress to the crops. Crops are meant to be left to grow, and then you only come, even harvesting is disturbing the crop, but then we have to do it, because if you don't harvest, you're also stressing it at the same time. So basically those are things that are done inside the greenhouse on a daily basis. Like today, this particular part has been supported, but then the other part is yet to be supported, and you can see some have already dropped, but they are being supported today. So it shouldn't take too long on the ground before they are supported. So that's basically the farm activities. It involves, in the morning you come in, you feed the crops. After feeding the crops, you do the cultural activities, be it removing suckers. Suckers, first, for instance, this particular variety, you have to remove the first flowers, and then there is also what we call suckers. So suckers grows between this particular is the main branch, the main stem, and then there is a main branch. So anything that comes between the main branch and the main stem is a sucker, and we have to do away with it, or else it will derail the growth of this particular plant. So those are the cultural activities that you need to do on a daily basis. You also need to check on nutrition so that you're balancing the nutrients that you're feeding to these particular crops to ensure that you get, because we are in business, of course. So when you're in business, you have to take care of the small issues so that it can take care of your pocket as well at the end of it. In 2016, I was in my second year at the university. I studied Bachelor's of Education Arts with IT. It's quite funny how I transitioned from teaching in class and now I'm teaching farmers. Seems like farming was just calling me from time to time. Even when I try evading it, I still found myself back into farming. So 2016, I did farming. 2017, I also did farming and took a short break for a few months. Went for attachment and the process in campus. Went for attachment and came back again. Went on with farming. So I've been into farming and environmental activities since campus. That has made it easier for me to see technology in farming and how we can adopt it in an environment that is constantly changing in terms of climate, because right now climate change is a big thing, and we're trying to look for ways to survive even amidst these particular calamities and drought, heavy rainfalls. So that's why I transitioned from conventional farming. Now I'm into hydroponics farming. At first it began as an experiment, but now we've mastered the art and we've tailor-made it to fit the Kenyan environment. Like right now we are in a particular place known as Ngong, Kibiko. This place is semi-arid, we can do the farming and produce food from this particular place, then why should we not do it in Africa and in particular Kenya, when we have all the needed resources, better resources than even. That's the reason as to why I do farming on a daily basis, because I love the idea of feeding the nation. I'm contributing into something. Right now, I'm also contributing into making people transition from different careers, adopt farming as a way that they can feed their families, come up with income from this particular venture. So I'm quite passionate when it comes to farming, in terms of I do facilitations, young kids from younger age up to the elderly people who wants to transition to farming, because I want to do away with the perception of farming is meant for particular age group, or it's a retirement package that someone comes out from working environment or corporate environment and then you want to transition to farming. So I want people to start adopting it as early as now. That's why I go to little kids, primary schools, secondary schools, because there is this perception of, if you go to a class and ask, what do you want to become in future? You'll see that there is an overload on these particular careers like doctor, engineers, lawyers. Those are the careers that are mentioned regularly. But then we want to change the perception. I want to reach a class one day, and the moment I ask the question, whom do you want to become in future? I'll feel happy to see some hands, if not all hands, people who want to do farming as a career. So that's the path that I've chosen, and that's why I am so passionate about it. So I give talks about farming generally. So as you can see that we are removing the first flowers and suckers as well. So it's only removed for the first phase of this particular plant. So after transplanting, now this is 2 weeks, as I had mentioned before, and that's why you can see that we are removing those particular early flowers, because we want to ensure that this crop has developed to a level that it can sustain life. It's the same concept with you won't expect a child to give birth to another child. So these are still fairly young crops, and you have to, as a form of management, you have to remove the first flowers so that you ensure that the crops reaches a level that it can sustain a fruit growth. You don't want it to come up with a fruit that is so big and then it kills the plant. So that's the reason as to why we are doing these cultural activities on a daily basis. Okay, so this particular greenhouse is under production. These are about 3.5 to 4 months old crops, and we are doing harvesting in this particular greenhouse. We've been doing harvesting, and we are still continuously doing harvesting. So this one has already achieved a tonnage of 1.5 tons for that duration, and the target for cucumber is 3.3. When we've reached 3.3, we consider that we've broken even, and all expenses, all factors put into that particular amount, we still have our profit, our large profit. So the harvesting is continuing, and John is helping us. John, say hi. Hi. So John is helping us in doing harvesting in this particular greenhouse, and now you can see the produce are brought to this particular point, and then they'll be placed into the crates that have already been brought inside the greenhouse. So we can just follow John and see what happens during harvesting and how he manages this particular harvesting. So it's a continuous process. You can see the growth is still continuing. There are young ones, there are old ones that are being now harvested, and this is how basically harvesting for cucumber is done. This is the local variety. Sasa it has pricks that can prick you. if you just don't handle them well, they can prick you, the fruit itself. So you can see how it is done. John is quite an expert when it comes to managing these particular crops. The reason as to why the leaves are being cut is because basically when this crop comes from down up to the tip, growth is still continuing, and we don't want a situation whereby the leaves touch the ground and attract diseases, fungal infections and such. So, and we also need only these top leaves for the continuous growth and feeding these particular fruits that are developing. So we don't need anything below where we've already harvested, because the harvesting started way ahead that particular point, and then it transitions progressively up to this particular point. So it's only prudent, or it's only wise to have leaves where the fruit are, because you see the process of photosynthesis and the feeding, basically plant physiology, you'll need leaves to feed these particular fruits, and the only leaves you need are the ones that are close to that particular fruit. So that's why it's a management practice to avoid pathogens, infection of these particular crops, and feeding for no apparent reason, because as I had emphasized before, it's about efficiency and using as little resources as we can use for this particular system. So that's the reason as to why you can see those particular leaves are being removed, and at the same time we are harvesting. Okay, so John is trying to kill two birds with the same stone. As he does the harvesting, he's also cutting the leaves that are in excess. We call it defoliation. So he's reducing the foliage, foliar cover, and at the same time cutting those particular fruits. So harvesting is done by cutting. You just don't go pulling it out, because you might cause injury to the plant, and that's why he has to have a scissor to do the cutting. So that's basically harvesting cucumber. It doesn't take rocket science to just do it and have your produce ready for selling. So in a nutshell, that's how harvesting for cucumber is done. In conventional farming, the biggest challenge is weather dynamics. So like you see, for instance, your crop might be in a particular level that needs particular attention. Since you can't control the environment, you can't control sun, you can't control rain, then it becomes quite difficult to maximize on your profits and your yield over that particular period. And then there are so many dynamics, because outside under conventional, in the past, you could predict, meteorological department could tell you that it will rain from July to this particular month. But then the dynamics have changed. Rains stagger, drought kicks in, and so it becomes quite difficult to predict the environment. So this is quite a controlled environment in a way, such that we can control the temperature, we can control. The rain doesn't come, we don't depend on the rain. So that's why we use the drip system. So conventional way of farming is still good and it still works, but then it has a lot of challenges. Equally, I won't just say that this has no challenges. It has its own challenges, but then if you compare it to the conventional way of farming has a lot of dynamics, beginning from pest control, going to pathogens in the soil that are inside the soil that you can't control sometimes, and sometimes you have to use a lot of chemicals to control and to ensure that you've gotten yield out of your crops. So that's the dynamic that comes with conventional farming compared to hydroponics farming. I'm not in any way saying that this one is more superior to the conventional way of farming. The conventional way of farming, if it is done right, then you are able to get your yield. If you do it professionally and you seek agronomical support from professionals, you are able to maximize your profit from it. Equally, the hydroponic system as well, you can achieve the same, because there is this perception of people want to indulge into farming because the greenhouse looks flashy, so attractive, and you just want the hype of telling people that, you know, I do hydroponic farming, I do greenhouse farming. But then you should first of all wear the spectacles of looking at it as a business, not as a show-off entity. The greenhouse can be just a house that gives you nothing, but it just gives you cosmetic beauty and every other thing that comes with farming. But then we ensure that we go deep into the dynamics that comes with operating this particular greenhouse. How do we maximize profit? Where do we minimize? Where do we maximize? So in such a way that at the end of it, when you check your book or your records, you're able to see that you made profit out of it. I'm more particular into checking and making sure that you're getting profit out of your farming venture. That's the only difference that I can take from conventional way of farming and the greenhouse way of farming. So we first arrange them here, and then they'll be arranged well in the crates, so that for presentability, you know, you don't want to take crops in a bad condition to your clients. So that's how the harvesting is done. We first arrange them here, then we'll transfer them to the particular crates. When I entered hydroponics farming from 2019, so 2019, the learning process until we transition whereby we are now doing it actively. The dynamics involved is that it had not matured enough as a new system. So we had to learn with it as we move along with it. Right now, the best case scenario that we've had, for instance, this is cucumber. So I'll give you different crops. For instance, this is cucumber. Your expenses can go up to 80,000 for the entire period, because it takes approximately 5 months. It can take up to 80 to 100,000. But then your target is to get approximately 3.6 tons from this particular greenhouse. If you reach 3.6 tons, you've already broken even. You've removed the production cost and you've remained with your profit as well. What happens is that from planting to harvesting, it takes when you take it as a seedling, because there is a difference between sowing it directly on the trough, and there is a difference between there is another dynamic of doing it on the trays, propagation, and then bringing it as a seedling. Seedlings take 21 days to develop so that they are ready enough to transplant. And if you sow it directly, the 21 days is translated to the planting date, because we start counting from the day you place the seed inside the trough. From that particular period to the time you start harvesting, you'll start harvesting between one month and a half. From that particular point, you should continuously harvest it for a maximum of 4 months, because after it has reached 4 months, now it starts cutting down on your profit and eating into your profit as well, because you continuously maintain the crop, which is an expense, but it doesn't give you a translation. It doesn't give you equal amount to what, or even more profit to what you've already put into it. Grading them now from grade 1, 2 up to 3. This one is profitable, but then it's not a get rich quick fix. So you just don't come to hydroponics farming thinking that you're going to start checking in, counting your checks immediately. You have to transition. What happens is that the best case scenario for this particular tonnage, you should achieve 3.6. Some people go to up to 4.5. So depending on how you take care of the crops and your availability. Not you shouldn't be a phone call farmer. You just call to ask, have you fed? Have you sprayed this? Have you done this? It should be that you are hands-on to maximize the profit. Even if you contact people to do it on your behalf, you should seek professional consultation. If you have a professional agronomist and everything, and then you put it in a way that it's based on results. I only pay you when we have results. That's how, if you are away, you can do farming in that way to see into it that you get profits. Different crop that I've also done is tomatoes. Tomatoes, the target is 6.6 tons. For you to achieve 6.6 tons, then it will mean that your cultural practices are top notch, feed on time. Like you make the crop to be very comfortable in a way that they don't receive any form of stress, because this crop also develops stress. And if they develop stress, they drop the flowers. Any flower that you lose, that's profit that is out of your pocket. For tomatoes, 6.6 tons. And then for cucumber is also, we work with 4.5 tons. These crops have different prices, ranging from January you'll get a different price, February you'll get a different price, and the highest price for cucumber at farm price is around, cucumber we can do at around 50 shillings per kg. For example, as Green Talos, we've done tomatoes. For a whole season of tomatoes, we did 6.6 tons. 6.6 tons, and then we sell them at 45 shillings per kg. So that should give you approximately, for a whole season, we should get around 350,000. But then your cost of production can go up to 120,000 or 150 sometimes. When you do the subtraction, if you get 350 and you've used 150 as your cost of production, that includes labor, the people who are helping you around. It also involves nutrients, simple things that come with maintaining that particular crop in that particular greenhouse. 150,000 Kenya shillings for the cost of production, and then you also have the extra 200,000 Kenya shillings that you've made. So that's your profit, that's your take home. So if you get the 200,000 Kenya shillings, that's your profit, you take it home, but then your expenses were limited to 150,000 Kenya shillings maximum. For capsicum, we've also done capsicum in our greenhouse. So for capsicum, what happens is that for our entire season, you are targeting at least 4.5 tons. If you sell it at 120 Kenya shillings, you can do the math. 4.5 tons, that's 4,500 kgs times 120. So it should give you the average amount that you should get. All season will run from, let's say, month 1 to the 8th month maximum, or the 7th month, depending on the crop care that you've involved in that particular greenhouse. Having said that, the expenses in terms of maintaining capsicum greenhouse will take you up to approximately 150 as well, but it's not so involving compared to tomatoes. But then 150 maximum as the amount that you need to part with in terms of production cost. And then when we come to cucumber, the target is minimum 3.3, but you can go as high as 3.6 tons. So if you do your math, we sell it at 50 shillings for the English cucumber, but then the local is at 45 Kenya shillings. So that's the price difference. The local one takes a little bit low in terms of maintenance. For cucumber, it shouldn't go beyond 80,000 Kenya shillings in terms of maintenance, nutrients, labor, even your transport and everything, where you come from to the farm. It shouldn't go beyond 80 to 100,000 Kenya shillings. And then you should achieve 3.6 tons, because it takes a little bit shorter duration. So you can do 3 cycles in a year, because it takes around 4 to 5 months to develop, 4 to 5 months from planting to harvesting. So if you do it collectively, let's say 4 months, then you should do at least 3 cycles in 1 year, because you can transition almost immediately every time you do away with the cucumber crop. That is basically the crops that we've done here. We just do the kales as a by the way. It's not the main activity that we do here. Kales can also give you the petty cash that you need to do 1 or 2 things within the greenhouse. You can always incorporate kales, sukuma wiki, and even you can as well eat it at home, because that's basically the reason as to why we do kales, not for commercial purposes mainly. The other big bit about farming is the market, because you don't want to get a situation whereby you've done farming but then you don't have a place to take your crops. For instance, for us, we do contract farming, whereby after we've done the production, we concentrate on production, and there are people who concentrate on off-taking our produce. I always advise that start from the market, talk to mama mbogas, talk to the supermarkets, the big markets that deal with groceries. Ask them what is being sold at a higher rate, so that when you do the farming, you have no issues with where to take your produce. Always do farming backwards. Start from the market, know what is needed, then come do that particular farming, because at the end of it, you have a place to take that produce. The biggest mistake people do in farming is that they always start with planting the crop and then they go looking for the market. You'll always get it wrong, and it will always mess you up. You'll have the perception that farming is not a venture that can be done with anyone.
Today, we are transplanting a capsicum variety Jeva. We're doing a spacing of 40 centimeters and a zigzag methodology to allow good cultural practices management, and as well as to manage cases of pest and diseases effectively. To walk you through the journey, this is the practicing methodology. You have to ensure that you don't cover up the root system to prevent you have to ensure that the stem is not covered to prevent issues like dumping off at this critical stage. It's a very important practice. Watering is very essential. How you do irrigation at this stage to avoid soil-borne issues that will come up due to fungal infections. So I will be able to share with you more and more about the journey that we've started today. I will be explaining to you how we've done fumigation up to the right step that we've got right now, and as even we proceed with the production. Thank you for your time.
We are looking into a way that we will transition to export market. We are doing everything pertaining to meeting the standards, and because we already have a clean system, because they really just want to know how you produce your crops and the chemical beat and everything pertaining to production of this crop to meet the international market. Transitioning to that particular market with the company known as DigiChange. So we're trying to do the agronomical beat very well, following the prescribed measures that are need to be taken so that we can meet that particular market. Right now, we can't exhaust the local market. We are selling our produce basically in the local market. It has been amazing, since it's quite difficult to feed the local market and exhaust all the avenues pertaining to market in. That's the reason as to why we are now doing it locally, but then we'll transition to export as well as time goes by. Once again, this is Green Talos, and thank you for joining me on the farm today and having me throughout the session until this particular moment. On phone, you can always find me on 0702 8186. So that's my personal phone number. You can always find me there, seek consultation in terms of anything agriculture, be it conventional way of farming or the hydroponics way of farming. Please, if you give me a call, just introduce yourself and get to tell me who you are, and then we'll know how to pick the conversation from there. I'm always on all social media platforms, that's Instagram and Facebook. What happens is that for consultation, we can always come, do the assessment, and tell you what you need in terms of construction expenses, preparation, and everything, depending on your proximity to the source whereby we will be getting these particular raw materials. So your expenses in terms of setting up this particular structure goes up depending on your proximity to Naivasha, because most of the things are found in Naivasha, be it the pumice, cocoa peats, the hardware, the greenhouse itself. So most of them are found in Naivasha if you want to find them cheaply. So depending on the proximity, if you are in Nyanza, the price might go higher. If you are in Western Kenya, the price might also go further higher. Consultancy, we always do it. Agronomical support, we guide you from the onset, check for you all the aspects that will be involved in production, so that we ensure that you maximize your profit. On social media, I'm known as Farmer Mboya. I do post everything that we do inside the greenhouse, the activities, crop care. So I do post and even give advice as well from time to time. Thank you guys for being with me through this journey as I took you through the hydroponic system, and it has been amazing explaining to you exactly what this is. Catch us live on Shamba Live TV. See you next time.